You asked, Jonathan, how we decide and how we have decided over time in legal services on what we're going to do and what issues and what concerns are important and will be worth our attention. It's obvious that there's never been enough manpower to go around, and so we, by any choice that we make, are excluding other choices. I think that at the outset, my impression at the time, and my sense looking back as well, is that there was just so much to be done that you could look upon yourself as just choosing issues of opportunity as they arose. Everybody who came in was affected by so many different aspects of the social services system, the consumer world, the housing world, that you had a choice almost of which of the issues you liked best for the day. And I think that for a long time, progressing that way was not a bad idea. It was directly responsive to the concerns that people put before you. It was not so responsive to the concerns that don't arise in a person's felt need for assistance. And over time, I think we've come to appreciate that you need to take a look back and from a wider perspective, see what it is that is causing people to be where they are. And sometimes those things are not what they think they are, or not what they come forward and ask for help with. I guess the paradigm conflict is between the vast number of people who need help with divorce, which they certainly do, and the very modest number of people who perceive deeper problems with the economy or with the system of commercial exploitation. And you cannot successfully do legal aid, I think, if you're only responsive to the people who come in the door. You really do have to exercise your experience and your wider knowledge of what's causing them to be where they are in order to make good choices. Because any time you take any one case, it says you can't take something else. If you choose to take all the divorces, it means you can't address more underlying causes of the poverty that people find themselves in. So you do have to strike some sort of a balance. And how to do that is really a problem, because we've long been accused of kind of sitting back in the abstract and engineering improvements in our clients' lives without any input from them. I think that's never been an accurate description, because people always give us their experience and their input when they're serving as clients, whether it's implicit or explicit. So I think we've always operated from some basis. But so often in my experience, both as a litigator and as a program director, we have vacillated between the desirability of picking just the right issues and really focusing on those, or just responding to what comes in and picking from those things that come in the things that deserve the most attention. And I think either approach can be useful. I don't think there's a doctrinaire way to do that, so long as you're always conscious that any decision you make precludes some other decisions that you could make.
Did you ever find yourself in the position where you were particularly itching to get your hands on something, some issue?
Even now, there's so many. Every year there are new issues, or every 3 or 4 years there's a whole new range of issues. I have really been working hard in the last year, I suppose, on a couple. One is the collection of debt by debt buyers who don't even know much about the debt, against mostly credit card debtors who've forgotten that they ever had a credit card. It's the zombie debt issue, and that's still a long ways from being addressed adequately, but we have some handles on it now, and it's been a long and interesting struggle to get those handles. And I hope sometime, we'll be able to deal with that successfully. And more recently, I've been working hard on late fees and subsidized residential leases, and that's a very interesting issue analytically. The legal doctrine behind that problem is complex, and I think we're beginning to get some handle on that as well. But as soon as I get what seems like the perfect case, something happens. I get partway down that road, and either the other side just folds, or my client folds, or something happens, and so you just have to keep plugging at those. And it's very hard to imagine a case and then make that happen just right then and there. It usually takes a sequence of unfolding experiences before you know really what the right case is, and how to get a grip on it so that it won't squeal away.
It sounds a lot like you had a good way of standing back and not giving importance to one issue over another issue. I'm not saying you didn't prioritize issues, but you're claiming that you did not have one issue that you would seek after?
That's right, and that's reflected in the way this program has been structured over a period of time. There was a period in which the trend in legal services was to require every program to come up with a list of the most important things and establish those as priorities and basically do those and nothing else. And that may have been a useful corrective to the alternative, which was to have no priorities at all. We always sort of took the middle ground. We always used those priorities that we put on that list as really identified things that we were looking for, but not to the exclusion of everything else, because we always got so much useful input and I think did such useful work on things that just sort of appeared before us. And that openness to targets of opportunity, I think, is really important and should not be eliminated just by the recognition that some things are important and also need to be addressed. So we have never had exclusive priorities. We've had identification of particularly important issues to be addressed without excluding anything else.
And is not all legal aids adopt that approach?
Every legal aid by now. But I think of recent years that sort of ironclad locking into priorities has not been such a big deal. Most people have realized it just doesn't work anyway, because the clamor for some things like custody and divorce is just so strong you can't pretend that's not a need. And you have to do some of those things, just if only to maintain your credibility with the bar, even if they don't seem to you as potentially impactful on the issues of poverty as some other things.
In terms of choosing issues to tackle, do legal aid lawyers are they tempted to pick up issues that, for example, members of the bar, non-legal aid attorneys will do pro bono work? Will they choose particular issues and then leave others to legal aid lawyers? Does it work like that?
Well, I think it works different ways in different places, you know. And I'm not to say that any of them are good or bad, but I think that generally speaking, the issues that are so important to our clients, the issues of poverty, are just issues that the bar generally are not familiar with. You know, the litigation about conditions of public assistance could never have been a private bar thing, because who in their right mind would wade into that complexity without any prospect of fee reward? And yet for the first decade of my practice, that's where the action was, you know, sort of rationalizing the AFDC system. And I think that's still true of many of the issues around which we spend our time in legal services, is that the experience with those issues just doesn't exist in the private bar generally. Now, there's certainly skills in the private bar that could be brought to bear on those issues, but it's hard to shift to the private bar the experience and the understanding of why that's important. That it makes the private lawyer interested in pursuing it. There's also, I think, a natural difference in what you're trying to accomplish if you're a private lawyer. I think there's very little of the private bar. There is some of the private bar that has the sense of of what the mission is that has to be accomplished beyond the individual case. But I think most private lawyers, and rightly so, are quite focused on their client's interest in this particular case. And if a case can be got rid of to the advantage of the client, then that's really the end of the discussion pretty much. It's much more complicated if you're representing an individual person, but also concerned about the development of the law for the thousands of people who will have similar circumstances but are not before you in the present case. And you do have to keep that in mind. It is, after all, clearly part of our charge to be improving the law for all those folks. And it's sometimes a difficult question about how effectively you can do that while still serving the interest of an individual client. I think what the private bar often doesn't understand is the frequent strong interest of an individual poor person in contributing to that progress. You know, you'd think that people who have little to nothing in the way of resources to fall back on would think that progress in the law was a luxury they could not afford. But that's really not been my experience. I think maybe because they've suffered hardship at the hands of the law or the particular party that they're wrestling with, they're often very interested in making sure that it doesn't happen the same way to somebody else, or is resolved in a way that makes it easier for people in the future.
Oh, well, thank you. We'll move on shortly.